The night my company crossed $1 million in revenue, I sat alone in a parking garage with a paper cup of gas station coffee and tears running down my face. Not because the business was failing. Not because I had lost money. I was crying because 2 hours earlier, I had walked into my own house carrying flowers and a bottle of champagne to celebrate the biggest milestone of our lives, and found my wife in our bedroom with my best friend. Not just my best friend. My business partner. The man who had stood beside me at my wedding. The man I trusted more than almost anyone. And if you had told me 6 years earlier that this would become my story, I would have laughed in your face. Because back then, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. But before I tell you how everything fell apart, I need to tell you how it all began. I grew up in Eastern Ohio, the kind of place where dreams were considered luxuries and survival was considered success. My father worked 2 jobs. My mother cleaned houses on weekends. Nobody in my family had money. Nobody owned businesses. Nobody talked about investments or entrepreneurship. People talked about paying bills. They talked about overtime. They talked about making it to next Friday. From the time I was 16, I worked at a grocery store stocking shelves after school. Not because I wanted spending money, because I needed it. And maybe that's why I became obsessed with stability. I went to college on a partial scholarship and enough student loans to make me nauseous every time I checked my balance. I studied business administration, not because I dreamed of becoming the next billionaire. Honestly, I was terrified of being poor. Business felt like armor. It felt practical, safe. And that's where I met Derek. Derek was everything I wasn't. Confident, charismatic, the kind of guy who walked into a room and somehow everybody looked at him. He came from a comfortable family. His parents were professionals. He spoke with this natural confidence that made people trust him immediately. Meanwhile, I was awkward and overthought everything. Yet somehow, we became friends. Junior year, we got paired together in a marketing class project neither of us wanted. 3 sleepless nights, terrible pizza, constant arguments. And somewhere inside those 72 hours, we discovered something. We balanced each other perfectly. I loved numbers, processes, systems. Derek loved ideas, people, selling. He could make anyone believe in something. By the end of that semester, we both knew one thing. Someday, we were going to build something together. Around the same time, I met Melissa. She was studying nursing. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. But she had this warmth about her that made you feel safe. She laughed with her whole heart. And when she smiled at you, you felt like everything was going to be okay. We started dating casually. At least that's what we told ourselves. But somewhere along the way, she became home. Melissa never cared how much money I had. She never cared that I drove an old car. She never cared that I worried too much. She just loved me. And for a guy who had spent his whole life feeling like he had to earn everything, that kind of love felt like a miracle. After graduation, life became normal. Melissa got a nursing job. I joined a logistics company. Derek started working for a marketing agency. For 2 years, we lived ordinary lives. Friday beers with Derek. Movie nights with Melissa. Arguments about grocery budgets and rent. Nothing exciting. Nothing dramatic. Just life. And honestly, I was happy. Then one night, at 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Derek. His voice sounded different. Excited. Almost frantic. "Get over here," he said. "I found it." What? The idea. And that phone call changed everything. Because none of us knew that the dream we were about to build together would eventually destroy all 3 of us. I still remember walking into Derek's apartment that night. He had whiteboards covered in notes, coffee cups everywhere, and the craziest look in his eyes. "The corporate gifting industry is broken," he said. I laughed. "That's your billion-dollar idea?" He grinned. "Not billion-dollar. $1,000,000. At the time, that sounded just as impossible. But as he talked, I started seeing it. Companies spent millions every year sending gifts to clients and employees. But most options were generic. Fruit baskets, cheese trays, cheap branded junk nobody actually wanted. We wanted to create something better. Curated gift boxes, premium presentation, subscription services, completely managed. And by 2 in the morning, we had made the decision. We were doing this. When I told Melissa, I expected fear, doubt, arguments. Instead, she smiled and said something I still remember. If you believe in it, then I believe in you. Looking back, that level of trust feels almost unbelievable, because she carried us financially for 8 months. 8 months, while I chased a dream. And not once, did she make me feel guilty about it. Derek and I put everything into the company. Savings, credit cards, loans. We worked from the spare bedroom in the house Melissa and I rented. For the first month, we shared one laptop. One. Sometimes Derek would use it in the morning, and I'd use it at night. We were broke, terrified, and happier than we'd ever been. Then we landed our first client. $3,000. To anybody else, that wasn't much money. To us, felt like winning the lottery. Derek and I sat in the parking lot afterward screaming like idiots. When I got home, Melissa had cooked dinner. She raised her glass and said, "To the future millionaires." We all laughed. None of us knew how close she'd actually be. Year 1 became year 2. Year 2 became year 3. We hired our first employee, Priya. And honestly, she was better than both of us. Smarter, organized, reliable. Without Priya, we probably would have failed. By year 3, we had 6 employees, a real office, and nearly $400,000 in revenue. Melissa and I got married. Small ceremony. Nothing extravagant. Just beautiful. And standing beside me as best man was Derek, my brother, or at least, that's what I called him. His speech made everyone cry. Mine almost made everyone fall asleep. And as I stood beside Melissa, I remember thinking something. I have everything. The woman I love, the business I dreamed about, and the best friend anyone could ask for. God, life was good. Or so I thought. Because I wasn't a perfect husband. Not even close. The business consumed me. Weekends disappeared. Date nights got canceled. Vacations got postponed. There were nights when Melissa sat beside me talking, and I barely heard a word because my mind was buried inside spreadsheets. She told me she felt lonely, more than once. I'd apologize, promise to do better, and I meant it. I really did. But after a week or 2, I'd fall back into old habits. Meanwhile, Derek was always around. Dinner, holidays, Saturday mornings, barbecues. He was family, and family is supposed to be safe. The affair lasted 7 months. 7 months. I didn't know that then. I found out much later. Back then, everything still looked perfect. Then one afternoon, Priya burst into my office carrying her laptop. She looked excited. "We did it." "What?" "We hit 1 million. I stared at the screen. $1 million. For years, thousands of sleepless nights, every sacrifice, every fear, every prayer. $1 million. I wanted to celebrate. I called Derek. No answer. Strange. I figured he was busy, so I bought flowers, the nicest arrangement I could find, and a bottle of champagne. I drove home smiling. For the first time in years, I felt light, happy, hopeful. I didn't announce myself when I walked in. I wanted to surprise Melissa. The house was quiet. I walked down the hallway, and then, my entire world ended. The bedroom door was slightly open. I saw Melissa first, then I saw Derek. And in less than 5 seconds, everything I believed about my life died. Melissa looked at me. The sound she made, I'll never forget. Derek turned around and froze. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't even speak. I simply placed the flowers on the floor, set the champagne beside them, and walked away. 20 minutes later, I was sitting alone in a parking garage, holding a terrible cup of coffee, crying. Because on the same day we became millionaires, I lost my wife, my best friend, and the life I thought I'd built. And I had absolutely no idea that the worst was still ahead. People love talking about betrayal, but nobody talks about what happens after. The silence, the emptiness, the mornings when getting out of bed feels impossible. Melissa moved out within a week. I filed for divorce 30 days later. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations, no desperate attempts to save the marriage. I simply didn't have anything left to say. The woman I had loved for nearly a decade didn't exist anymore, at least not the version I thought I knew. Financially, the divorce was straightforward. Ironically, that was thanks to Derek. Years earlier, he had encouraged me to sign a prenup. At the time, I thought he was being smart. Looking back, that memory still makes me sick. But the marriage wasn't my biggest problem. The business was, because Derek still owned 50%. Legally, nothing had changed. He was still my equal partner. And for 3 weeks, I seriously considered walking away, just disappearing, letting him have everything, starting over somewhere else. Because every spreadsheet, every client, every office chair reminded me of him. Then one Sunday morning, my phone rang. It was Priya. Everyone knew what had happened by then. But she didn't call to offer sympathy. She called to save me. "Listen carefully," she said. "Do not let him have what you built." Her voice was calm, serious. "I know who stayed until midnight fixing problems. I know who designed the systems. I know who called clients personally. I know who made this company work. Don't give him your dream." Then she told me something else, something that changed everything. During the previous 3 weeks, Derek had already started talking to senior employees. He was discussing restructuring, trying to slowly push me out, trying to steal the company. And suddenly, something inside me changed. The grief remained, the anger remained, but underneath it, something harder appeared. Focus. I hired a lawyer, not an online lawyer, not a cheap template, a real business attorney named Sandra. Sandra listened to everything, never interrupted, never judged. And when I finished, she folded her hands and said, "You have options." Those 3 words saved me. Our partnership agreement was weak, but not hopeless. She explained that I needed patience, documentation, strategy, not revenge. Revenge is emotional. Strategy is profitable. For the next 2 years, I lived like a monk. 1-bedroom apartment, old car, packed lunches, no vacations, no unnecessary spending. Every extra dollar went into savings. Meanwhile, Derek and I worked together, every day. Can you imagine that? Sitting in meetings, discussing quarterly numbers, smiling professionally, with the man who destroyed your life. We never mentioned Melissa, not once. Business only, nothing else. The office felt like a funeral home, but I showed up, every day. And slowly, I started understanding something. Clients didn't stay because of Derek. They stayed because of trust. And trust was my department. When shipments were delayed, I called personally. When mistakes happened, I fixed them. When customers had concerns, they called me, not Derek. Over the next 2 years, I strengthened every relationship. Not illegally, not unfairly. I simply cared. And people remembered that. Meanwhile, Derek was changing. Success had gone to his head. New house, luxury vacations, expensive cars, designer watches, and Melissa was right beside him, living the dream they had stolen, or so it seemed. Then one afternoon, almost 2 years after the divorce, Derek entered my office, excited, confident. He had a proposal, aggressive expansion, new warehouses, new product lines, huge loans, massive risks, $800,000. He wanted to bet everything. I listened, asked questions, acted interested, and then I said something simple. "Let me think about it." What he didn't know was that I'd already spent 2 years preparing for this exact moment. Because while Derek was spending money, I was building leverage. And soon, everything would change. Not through revenge, not through anger, but through something far more dangerous: patience. And Derek had absolutely no idea that the empire he thought belonged to him was about to slip through his fingers forever. While Derek dreamed bigger, I became quieter, more patient, more dangerous, not because I wanted revenge, because I had finally learned something. Emotion destroys, discipline wins. I brought Sandra and a financial advisor into the conversation, and together, we came up with a very different strategy. Derek wanted expansion. I wanted an exit, not because I was tired, but because I had begun noticing something. Large corporations were entering our space. Companies with money, infrastructure, resources, and they all had one thing in common. They wanted what we had. Not the brand, not the logo, the systems, the retention rates, the client relationships, the operational excellence, the things I'd spent years quietly building. So for 4 months, Sandra and I held meetings, private meetings, legal meetings, strategy meetings. Everything was completely above board. And eventually, we found the perfect buyer, a national company, well-funded, aggressive, and hungry. They loved our numbers. They loved our systems. But most importantly, they loved me, because every executive they spoke to reached the same conclusion. The real value wasn't the idea. It was the execution. And execution was my department. The acquisition structure was brilliant. Derek didn't realize it immediately, but I did. His 50% would be purchased for a fixed amount. My deal included something more: a leadership role, performance bonuses, future upside, equity. In other words, his money had an ending. Mine didn't. When Derek finally saw the numbers, he smiled. First, almost $1 million. Not bad. But then reality hit him. Because Derek had already spent money he hadn't earned yet. The expensive house, the luxury vacations, the car, the credit card debt, the lifestyle. He had built his future around expectations, not reality. And after taxes and debts, his $1 million wasn't really $1 million anymore. He panicked. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He hired lawyers, aggressive lawyers. He tried delaying the sale, blocking the deal, threatening lawsuits. But Sandra had prepared for everything. Every document, every clause, every signature, everything was airtight. 2 months later, the deal closed. I remember shaking his hand. Not because I wanted to, because I needed closure. And as he walked away, something surprised me. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But life wasn't finished rewarding patience. Because 18 months after the acquisition, I became vice president of operations. 32 employees, stock options, performance bonuses, more money than I'd ever imagined. But honestly, that wasn't the best part. The best part happened outside work. I started therapy, something younger me would have laughed at. Turns out, it saved my life. I started working out, sleeping properly, reconnecting with old friends. And slowly, the broken version of me disappeared. Then, I met Rachel. And no, she wasn't some magical fairy tale. She didn't save me. I saved myself. Rachel simply met the man I had become. She was smart, funny, kind. And for the first time in my life, I understood what being present really meant. No missed date nights. No half listening. No putting work before everything else. Because losing Melissa taught me something painful. Success means nothing if nobody gets to enjoy it with you. Meanwhile, life had other plans for Derek. He tried starting another company. And honestly, at first it looked promising. He had confidence, connections, money, everything he needed. Except one thing: me. Because Derek had always been brilliant at selling dreams. But dreams don't keep customers happy. Systems do. People do. Execution does. And for years, I had been the invisible engine behind his success. Without realizing it, he had mistaken my strengths for his own. and reality was about to teach him a lesson. Client complaints, missed deadlines, employee turnover, chaos. One client left, then another, and another. Within 2 years, his company collapsed completely, and around the same time, his relationship with Melissa collapsed too. The two people who had destroyed my marriage couldn't even save their own. Melissa moved back to Arizona, and Derek lost almost everything. But the strangest part of this story was still ahead, because one day I received an email, and when I saw the sender's name, I nearly laughed. It was Derek, and after everything he'd done, he was asking me for help. About 6 months after Derek's company collapsed, I received an email, not a text, not a phone call, an email, and somehow that felt appropriate, formal, distant, controlled. I recognized the sender immediately. Derek. I stared at my screen for almost a minute. Then I opened it. The message was polite, almost painfully polite. He said he'd heard I was leading a major initiative at the parent company. He said he believed he still had something valuable to offer. And then he attached his resume. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because life is strange. 6 years earlier, I had walked into my own house carrying flowers. Now the man who had taken my wife was asking me for a job. I didn't answer immediately. For 4 days, I said nothing. Then I forwarded the email to Sandra. By then, she wasn't just my lawyer. She was a friend. Her reply arrived an hour later. 3 words. Your call, counselor. I sat there smiling. Then I thought about everything. The parking garage, the flowers, the champagne, the tears, the divorce, the years of rebuilding, Priya telling me not to let him have what I built. And finally, I made a decision. I wrote back. I thanked him for reaching out. I told him I'd thought carefully about it. And then I informed him that there actually was an opening. Regional sales coordinator. Mid-level. No executive authority. No leadership responsibilities. Performance-based compensation. And one final detail. The position reported directly to me. I sent the email. And 24 hours later, he accepted. Just like that. 6 years. And life had completed the circle. The first day he walked into my office, he looked older, thinner, tired. There were more gray hairs, less confidence, less arrogance. He extended his hand and quietly said, "Thank you." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I miss our friendship." Just, "Thank you." And honestly, that was enough. Because by then, I didn't need apologies. Apologies don't rebuild years. Apologies don't erase betrayal. And I had stopped waiting for them a long time ago. For 8 months, Derek worked under me, and people always ask me the same question. Did you make his life miserable? No, I didn't. Because revenge gets exhausting. Peace doesn't. I treated him exactly the same way I treated everyone else. With professionalism, respect, and clear expectations. No cruelty, no humiliation, no references to the past. Just work. And strangely, that became the greatest victory of all. Because one day, I realized something. I no longer hated him. I no longer hated Melissa. I simply didn't carry them anymore. Meanwhile, my own life had become something beautiful. Rachel and I got married. Not a huge wedding. Not extravagant. Just family, friends, and honesty. Real honesty. The kind I used to think happened automatically. It doesn't. You build it. Every day. Together. 2 years later, we welcomed our daughter, Emma, named after my mother. And the first time I held her, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I felt complete. Not successful. Not rich. Complete. One afternoon, while driving to Rachel's parents' house, I passed Derek's old home. The one he'd bought after everything happened. The one he thought represented winning. There were children's bikes in the driveway, a vegetable garden, new owners, new memories, and I smiled. Not because he'd lost it, because someone else had found happiness there. That's life. Nothing belongs to us forever. Not houses. Not businesses. Not even people. The only thing that truly belongs to us is who we become. People sometimes ask me if I regret marrying Melissa. And honestly, no, I don't. Because I genuinely loved her. And I think she loved me too. At least once. People are complicated. Life is complicated. And broken people make broken decisions. I wasn't a perfect husband. She wasn't a perfect wife. But betrayal was her choice. Healing was mine. And looking back, that's what matters. Because 6 years ago, I sat alone in a parking garage, drinking terrible coffee, convinced my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. But I hadn't. I had only lost people who were never meant to walk beside me forever. What I didn't know was that life was clearing space. Space for peace. Space for growth. Space for love. Space for a future I couldn't even imagine yet. And if you're sitting in your own parking garage right now, if someone you trusted shattered your world, hear me carefully. Don't let them take what matters most. Not the business. Not the money. Not even the memories. Protect the part of yourself that still believes tomorrow can be better. Because that part is priceless. The night my company hit $1 million, I thought my story had ended. But stories don't end when your heart breaks. Sometimes